It started with a sound Elijah Carter hadn't heard in years. The deep, trembling growl of diesel engines. 10 of them. The vibration rolled through the Texas dirt, shaking the windows of his small ranch house. At first, he thought it was a passing convoy, maybe construction trucks from the new neighborhood a few miles down the road. But when he stepped onto his porch and saw a line of white tour buses crawling down his private road, dust rising like smoke behind them, his heart sank. For a man who had spent the last 5 years chasing silence, this was a nightmare. Elijah was a retired firefighter, a widower, and a man who'd earned his peace the hard way. He'd spent 20 years running into burning buildings for people who didn't even know his name. After his wife passed, he sold their city home and bought this quiet 80-acre ranch, tucked away from everything. No HOA. No drama. No noise. Just a long stretch of land, a few horses, and a porch that faced the rising sun. He built everything with his own hands. The fences, the barn, even the gate that kept the world out. Every morning, he brewed his coffee, leaned against the railing, and listened to nothing but the wind and the birds. He used to say, "Peace is expensive, but once you pay for it, don't let anyone take it away." But lately, peace had become harder to keep. Ever since that new gated community popped up near the highway, life hadn't been the same. The people who moved there, they weren't country folks. They were suburban rulers trying to bring city control into the open land. And their self-appointed queen was Karen Whitfield, the community's chairwoman. Karen was loud, bossy, and the kind of woman who introduced herself by her title. She'd shown up at Elijah's gate a few months back, smiling wide, clipboard in hand, talking about community tourism. Elijah had been polite, but firm. "No, ma'am. My ranch isn't open to the public." She'd left, smiling that fake smile, but he'd felt it in his gut. That wouldn't be the end of it. And now, as 10 massive buses filled his driveway, Elijah realized just how right he'd been. Something told him peace was about to get expensive again. Elijah stood frozen on his porch as the first bus door swung open with a hiss. The morning air filled with chatter and laughter. Strangers spilling out in bright hats and sunglasses, clutching cameras and coolers like they were on some guided safari. He blinked, trying to make sense of it. One woman pointed toward his horses grazing near the fence. "Oh my gosh, look. Real cowboys keep horses here," she squealed, dragging a child through his field. Elijah's stomach turned. That was his land. His fence. His animals. He climbed down the porch steps, boots thudding against the gravel. "Excuse me," he called out, his deep voice carrying through the morning haze. "This is private property." But no one stopped. They waved, smiling, thinking he was part of the show. A man in a straw hat chuckled. "Howdy, partner. You runnin' the tour today?" Elijah frowned. "Tour?" Before he could ask again, another bus pulled up, followed by more people. Teens with tripods, women with iced coffees, and an elderly couple asking where the restrooms were. Then came the voice that made his blood pressure spike. "Elijah, you didn't tell me you were awake already." Karen Whitfield stepped out of a shiny silver SUV like she owned the place. Her hair was perfect, her nails gleamed, and her tone was coated in that smug sweetness that made every word sound like a command. "Karen," Elijah said slowly, "what's going on here?" She waved her hand like it was nothing. "Oh, lighten up. I organized a community field trip, local families exploring rural heritage. I figured your ranch would be the perfect stop." He took a step closer. "Without asking me." She adjusted her sunglasses. "You said no, Elijah. But honestly, you've got all this land doing nothing. You should be grateful people finally get to enjoy it." Elijah's jaw tightened. "This isn't a park. It's my home." Karen smirked. "Relax. I already collected the tour fees. They think it's called the Heritage Cowboy Experience. Cute, right?" Elijah's pulse started pounding in his ears. "Get them off my property." Karen rolled her eyes, muttering, "You're overreacting." That was the last word she managed to get out before Elijah turned, walked toward the gate, and reached for the lock. The metal groaned as it swung shut. Clang. And suddenly, the laughter stopped. For a few minutes, nobody noticed what he'd done. The tourists were too busy taking pictures, feeding the horses, and wandering into the open barn. But then a man near the gate tugged on it and frowned. "Hey, it's locked." Another woman tried to push it open. "That can't be right. The driver says the road's blocked on both sides." The laughter faded. The air turned tense, like everyone suddenly realized they weren't on a tour at all. They were trespassing. Karen spun around, her smile gone. "Elijah," she barked, "unlock this gate right now." He stood by his truck, arms crossed, calm as ever. "You brought 10 buses of strangers onto private property without permission. You sold tickets to a place you don't own. That's not tourism, Karen. That's trespassing and fraud." Her cheeks flushed red. "Oh, stop being dramatic. I was doing something good for the community. These people came here expecting an experience." He nodded slowly. They got one. A few of the tourists started whispering, eyes darting between them. One man asked, "Wait, you mean this ain't part of a real ranch tour?" Karen snapped, "Of course it is. Don't listen to him." But Elijah didn't say a word. He just pulled out his phone and started recording. Calm, steady, documenting everything. Karen's confidence cracked. She lunged toward him, trying to grab the phone, but the crowd had already started filming too. "Ma'am, what's going on here?" Someone shouted. "You charged us for this." Another yelled. One of the bus drivers, a tall guy in a blue uniform, walked up shaking his head. "Lady, we paid you a deposit. You said this was your land." Karen stammered. I was just trying to help people appreciate the outdoors." "By breaking into my ranch?" Elijah said quietly. "You lied to every person standing here." The crowd's mood shifted fast, from confusion to anger. People started demanding refunds, drivers argued, and parents tried to calm their crying kids. Karen stood in the middle of it all, her perfect image falling apart, voice trembling as she shouted for everyone to stay calm. But Elijah just leaned against his truck, silent, watching the chaos she created. For the first time that morning, Karen realized something terrifying. She wasn't in control anymore. Within 20 minutes, 2 sheriff's cars rolled up the dusty road, lights flashing silently in the fading afternoon sun. The rumble of their engines cut through the chaos. The crowd parted, a mix of angry tourists and frightened bus drivers pointing toward Karen. Deputy Morales stepped out first, hat tilted low, eyes scanning the scene. He recognized Elijah immediately. "Mr. Carter," he said calmly, "what in God's name happened here?" Elijah gestured toward the buses. "You tell me, Deputy. Seems like Mrs. Whitfield here decided to turn my ranch into a theme park." Karen rushed forward, talking over him. "He's exaggerating. It was just a harmless community visit. These people are being dramatic." The deputy raised a hand. "Ma'am, step back." His tone was firm, that voice cops used when they'd already decided who was lying. "You organized this?" Karen hesitated, her voice cracking. "Well, yes, but I didn't think he'd mind. It's not like he was using all this land." A wave of gasps rippled through the tourists. One woman shouted, "We paid you hundreds for this." The deputy's eyes hardened. "Ma'am, you took payment for access to private property that isn't yours. That's criminal trespass and fraud." Karen tried to recover. "You can't charge me for trying to help the community." Elijah crossed his arms. "Help? You had 10 buses trampling my pasture, scaring my horses, breaking my fences, and you pocketed the cash." The deputy sighed, then looked at his partner. "Go ahead and get her statement." As his partner approached, Karen began pleading. "You can't do this. Elijah, tell them you're not pressing charges." But he didn't answer. He just met her eyes, calm, steady, unshaken. Years of fighting fires had taught him something most people never learn. When everything around you burns, the only thing that saves you is stillness. When the deputy finally turned her around and cuffed her wrists, the crowd erupted in murmurs. Phones recorded. Kids whispered. Even the bus drivers clapped under their breath. Karen's voice broke into a high, trembling cry as she was led toward her SUV. "You're making a mistake." Elijah just exhaled, dust swirling around his boots. "No, Karen," he said softly. "You did." And for the first time that day, silence returned to the ranch. By the next morning, the story had already exploded online. Someone's video from the ranch, the one where Karen was screaming as she was cuffed, hit 1 million views overnight. The headline read, "HOA Queen Busted After Selling Fake Ranch Tours." For Elijah, it was strange watching the world react to something that, for him, was just another lesson in boundaries. Reporters showed up at the ranch gate. Neighbors who'd never spoken to him before were suddenly bringing pies and shaking his hand. Even the sheriff stopped by later that week, chuckling as he handed Elijah a copy of the official charges: fraud, trespassing, and unauthorized commercial use of private property. Karen had gone quiet. The community chairwoman had resigned from her post, claiming stress-related reasons. Rumor was she'd also been sued by a few of the tourists she'd scammed. Her perfect reputation gone overnight. But Elijah didn't celebrate. He wasn't the type to gloat. Justice to him wasn't about revenge. It was about peace being restored. That evening, the sky turned gold over his land again. He sat on his porch with a mug of black coffee, listening to the wind hum through the fields. The same horses that had been frightened by the chaos now grazed calmly near the fence. The buses were gone. The noise was gone. Everything was still. He thought about his wife, how she used to remind him that peace isn't something you find once. It's something you keep choosing again and again. And sometimes that choice looks like walking away. Other times it looks like standing your ground. Elijah smiled faintly, the kind of smile that only comes when a storm has passed. "Peace is worth protecting," he murmured, almost to himself, "even if you gotta lock the gate to do it." As the sun dipped low, the camera would linger on the image, Elijah sitting quietly on his porch, a single lantern glowing beside him, the wide Texas horizon stretching endlessly beyond the gate he'd locked to defend his peace. No anger. No noise. Just calm, earned, not given. And in that stillness, the story ends where it began, with silence. If you were in Elijah's place, would you have locked the gate too? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more true stories like this.